Welcome to This Week in Missouri Politics. We want to jump right into the show this week because we're joined by the Missouri Secretary of State, Jay Ashcroft. Welcome back to the show, sir.
Thanks for having me.
So a lot's going on. People think during the interim there's not a lot happening. That's not the world we live in. There's tons of things going on in Missouri politics, and one of them is something I think there's been a lot of hyperbole and a lot of maybe the cheap shots they were aiming at the president has hit you a little bit. I wanted to have a conversation with you about this voter information that President Trump requested. Give me like the 30-second thing of what's actually going on, past the editorials, just what's happening.
There was a commission set up by the president to look at our voting processes and look at what could be done better. They sent out a request to every state asking for that information a state has about voters that's public. They specifically said they only wanted public information twice. In Missouri, that's going to be things like your name, your address, your date of birth, the elections in which you've received a ballot, and where you vote. It's not going to have your party affiliation. We don't even collect that in Missouri. Not going to have your Social Security number or any part of that. It's not going to say how you voted either. We just know that you got a ballot, because once you get that ballot, it's your business, not mine.
Well, I read some editorials about it, and so I thought, well, you know, if this is such a secret thing, whatever information here that Donald Trump's getting is such a big deal, well, I'd like to have it too. So just a simple hillbilly from West Butler County went to your office yesterday, and I brought the president's letter that he sent to you, a copy of it, and I asked your office, I'd like to have this. So they gave me this. It took about 5 minutes. It looked to be the most simplistic thing ever. I wonder if maybe some other folks in the media, instead of thinking that you're giving away like the size of Truman the Tiger's jersey to the federal government, maybe you just stop in. I mean, I don't know how often the rest of the media gets to Jeff City, but the beautiful town this time of year. Just go in the Kirkpatrick building and ask for it. It takes about 3 minutes, and this is what you get.
Well, actually, all of your major media outlets have received this data multiple times over the last 10 years. This is part of Missouri's Sunshine Act, 610 of the revised Missouri statutes. Anyone that requests in writing this public information and pays a nominal fee, they have to agree not to use it for commercial purposes, and we give it out. It's been given out 1,000 times in the last 10 years, probably. But
do you think this is just a state microcosm? I felt like from the beginning, the media hates Trump so frothfully and so over the top, and I think it's bad. People that criticize him, the media has a very serious role to play. But when you're the hatred is so transparent, it seems to me like when they criticize him on silly things like this, then when he does something that I think regular people should question, like firing the FBI director is a decision that the people should question from any president, they don't take it seriously. And this seems a byproduct of why there's a credibility gap.
I think, unfortunately, our politics have gotten so divisively that when something comes up, people immediately run to their side of the political arena.
And I think that's both parties, don't you think?
I think that it definitely can happen in both parties, and they don't look at actually what's happening. They just run to their media voice and get outraged. And I think it's unfortunate because, as in my position as Secretary of State, which the people of the state have privileged me to serve in, I work for everyone.
If the governor were to lead a legislative effort to change the law where you don't give this to the federal government, you comply with that, right?
Of course, I'm going to follow the law. Yeah. And one of the things that I was so concerned about the hyperbole about this request is I thought we were talking about things that actually weren't true instead of what could be a great issue for us to discuss with the legislature as to what exactly should be public information. The one thing that I will stand on with regard to this debate, though, firmly, besides following the law, is if the politicians have access to that data, everyone else should have access to it. I don't think we should be playing favorites and saying, I like you, I don't like you, I'm going to let you have the data, but not you. If the politicians get to use it for their campaigns, the citizens
I'm not even sure what you do with this.
It's
probably going to end up as a nice coaster at the Clayton Times, but I just thought it was this thing that's been made such a big deal was wildly easy to obtain for anyone. Let me ask you, since we're talking about this, though, there was a new initiative that's passed, voter ID, something you were very much in favor of. You've had a couple test runs now, one most notably in the Central West End. Actually, the governor's home precinct was one of the test runs now with a special election. How'd it go?
It went great. What we've been telling people from the beginning was if you're a registered voter in the state of Missouri and you go to your polling place on Election Day, you can vote, and that's what happened. I went to every polling place that morning. The St. Louis City Board of Elections was kind enough to give me that authority to go there and make sure that things were running smoothly, and that's what we found. I ran into one lady that was going back to her apartment to get an ID, And I asked her because I wanted to make sure she knew she could still go ahead and vote using the provisional ballot or some
So
other
if you
means.
forget your driver's license, you can still vote provisionally.
Right.
And that happened. There's no big government conspiracy. If you showed up in the Central West End, got in line after the governor to cast your ballot, you still got to vote even if you got your ID.
You got in line by 7 o'clock at night and your name was in the poll book because you're registered, you got to vote. And the best thing was I asked her, because she said, oh, I have to go back and get my driver's license. I said, ma'am, you can vote even without that. And she said, I know, they told me I could, but I just want to use my driver's license. So the poll workers did a great job of making sure that every voter knew if they were registered, they could vote.
So did you hear if the governor voted? And if he had his driver's license?
I didn't. I'm not going to get into individuals, whether or not they did or not.
I understand. That leads us to our next thing. There was a Safe at Home initiative where you're protecting people's privacy, I guess just like you did for Governor Greitens. What's the Safe at Home thing mean?
The Safe at Home is what we call an address confidentiality program. It also does mail forwarding for individuals that have been victimized by rape, domestic violence, human trafficking, things like that. It's a way to make it more difficult for their abuser to find them. It's a very simple, low-cost program that we have in Missouri and 35 other states do to just give a little bit of extra protection to people. We all have seen news incidents where someone was abused, and then finally killed because no one intervened. This is a way to make it harder for that abuser to get to those individuals, to protect that individual and their family, and help to hopefully break that cycle of violence. At the National Association of Secretaries of State meeting this past weekend, we passed a unanimous resolution that I'd called for to ask the federal government to recognize state address confidentiality programs. I'm working with Senator Blunt and with Congressman Smith to introduce federal legislation to make sure that participants are not only protected by the government of Missouri, a state government, but also by federal law.
So that's an interesting point, though. We talked about the Safe at Home initiative, and I think there are some folks that immediately when they saw the state's giving the federal government something, they were up in arms. Do you kind of see where those folks, before you even hear the facts, can reflexively be like, nothing. I personally don't want the government to know anything about me at all.
I can understand that. I think that's a great reason why we need to get past the inaccuracies in reporting, if that's a polite way to put it, and actually talk about exactly what's happening, what the actual data is, and have a discussion with the legislature about what we, the people of the state of Missouri, think should be public data. And if that needs to be changed, we can change that. But as Secretary of State, I'm going to follow the law.
So we've talked about how people vote. Let's talk about what they might be voting on in 2 years. There's a U.S. Senate seat. Senator McCaskill is up for re-election in 2018. Looks like she's hard charging ahead. The town hall she's holding, the Republican field changed a little bit. Congresswoman Wagner, most folks thought would run, someone you know very well. She decided not to run. And there's folks that thought you would be a top candidate even if she did. But now that she's out of the race, you've had some time after the legislative session. You've been in office for a few months now. Do you have any intention to run for U.S. Senate in 2018?
No, I don't. There are plenty of wonderful individuals that are going to be running on the Republican side. All of them would do a far better job of representing the people of Missouri than Senator McCaskill. I have the privilege of maybe having the best job in state government right now. I'm the Secretary of State. I help run elections. I make sure it's easy to start businesses. I go after securities individuals that would defraud the citizens of the state of Missouri, and I make sure we have good libraries so that people can learn and do whatever they want to do in life. I'm greatly happy to be here. I'm so privileged to have this position. I want to stay in Missouri. This is where I'm going to be.
It's an interesting thing with Congresswoman Wagner not running. People, I think, sometimes talk about folks that they don't know by their first name, which is not how we were brought up to do it back home. And they don't think about the real-life implications. You know from your father serving in federal government, there's a cost to that. It's not just sometimes just a choice that's, you know, I want to be a senator. There's a real challenge to serving in those roles, half a country away.
You know, it is a privilege. I don't want to act like it isn't a privilege to serve like that. No one ever earns it. It's a gift that's bestowed by the people.
You would have an insight into the real challenge of that.
But I'm a Missouri boy. I love Missouri. I don't want to live in Washington, D.C. I just bought a house in Jefferson City, so I'm going to be together with my family full time instead of traveling during the week as much. And I'm greatly pleased to be able to be Secretary of State.
Well, thank you for joining us here on This Week in Missouri Politics. Hope you'll come back as we get closer to actually having that election and talk about it here.
Thank you very much. Always great to be here.
We'll be right back with our opinion maker panel. Jeff Rorta back on the show along with Representative Plocher after this.
My name is Eric Philippi. I'm a veteran, a carpenter, and a father. When Eric Greitens said he was going to change politics as usual, folks like me didn't think the first thing he'd do as governor was take dead aim at our jobs and our families' livelihoods by working to repeal prevailing wage. Call Governor Greitens. Tell him to protect prevailing wage and to protect my family, not destroy it.
All across Missouri, our new car and truck dealers are building strong local economies. When you buy a car or truck in Missouri, you're helping to support over 20,000 Missouri families who rely on the auto industry for good-paying local jobs. You're also helping fund our communities, schools, first responders, and our roads because dealers generate millions of dollars in tax revenue. Missouri's automobile dealers have been the foundation of our communities for generations and for generations to come. The Missouri Automobile Dealers Association, the heart of Missouri.
Nobody likes power outages, including us. That's why Ameren Missouri is investing in new equipment and smarter technology to reduce outages and keep pace with future needs. And it's working. We're in the top 25% in the nation for reliability. And on average, our rates are 18% lower than other Midwestern states. Making sure the power is there when you need it. That's energy at work. Ameren, Missouri.
Welcome back to This Week in Missouri Politics. We're joined by our opinion maker panel, starting with Representative Dean Plocher. Welcome back to the show, sir.
Thank you for having me.
Partner, Palm Strategies, Mr. Republican these days. You're ever. I see you. I drive that back route through Washington, Jeff City sometimes. I see you all over both. Welcome back to the show, though.
It's good to be here.
Daniela Vasquez, Director of Communications at ACLU. Welcome back. And thank you for coming to our Clayton launch party. My favorite people that came. And we have Jeff Roorda, author, noted author, former legislator, War on Police. Of all the people I know that would be noted authors, I was surprised by you.
A lot of people are surprised that I could read a book, much less write a book.
Have you read the book? Let's just cut to the chase.
Yes, I did. I had to read my own book.
So let's talk about something that you are an expert on. I personally was surprised the governor dove into the St. Louis crime problem. I think the problem in crime in St. Louis City affects everything else in the state. St. Louis is the economic engine and the cultural engine of the state. When there's a crime problem and he actually put his name on it, what happened, what's the results, and what can we expect?
Yeah, it's a little bold. You know, it is a complex problem, and it's a big problem, and for him to weigh in on it is a little dangerous, frankly. I mean,
I agree.
He could leave it as local elected officials' problems, and
as
he
most
chose
do.
to. Right. So I give him credit for that. Now, let's not pretend that his plan is bold. I mean,
what is
a few
plan?
more. The crux of it was to add troopers to the highways, which we welcome the help, but writing a few more tickets on the interstate doesn't address the problem we have, which is violent crime and the fact that we're understaffed in responding to that violent crime.
And, you know, the thing I was most surprised by was, one, most politicians don't dive into this. Whatever you think of the governor, it was a bold move. And there's folks that have criticized it by calling it not that much or a stunt. But when you're the governor of Missouri, you can pull stunts. But when you put your name on it, now, when the crime stats come out 6 months from now, they're going to go back to him. So I assume this is not the end of his plan. And it should be. This is his hometown. He should be doing this, right?
Well, we might actually agree on something today, which it's
One thing, probably.
I think it's a little bit dangerous. I mean, the plan is there doesn't seem to be much of a plan. I'm curious to see how these collaborations will work with the Mission Saves Task Force, what exactly the plans are for the Highway Patrol to pick certain spots strategically. We know that there are lots of studies about predictive policing, essentially hotspot policing, and how that perpetuates racial bias in policing.
Wouldn't you say, though, there is a serious crime problem in the city of St. Louis? And the fact that the governor gets involved, no matter what the actual plan is, now this is his issue. If he's successful, he'll be lauded as one of the best governors in the history of the state. If he's not, he'll be criticized, right?
Sure.
The plan can't stop with just some troopers on some. It'll have to be more. But Scott Diggins, most politicians I know stay 100 miles away from a problem they can't solve. Whatever you think of the governor, whatever you think of a stunt, or whatever people want to criticize, kudos to him for stepping up on this problem.
I agree, and it's the right thing to do. I mean, crime in St. Louis is a major issue for the state of Missouri. He's the governor of the state of Missouri. I think it's hard for a governor to address that issue. It's much easier for a mayor to address that issue than it is a governor. The governor only has, state resources. So working with the Highway Patrol or the resources he has at his disposal, that's what he has to contribute to the effort. But I don't think that this is the end of his contribution to trying to solve the crime problem in St. Louis City.
I agree, Representative. I mean, this is his hometown. People in the city of St. Louis are Missourians too, and this problem, if folks are good friends watching in Sedalia, if the Sedalia economy struggles, the state can help pick them up. If the St. Louis economy struggles, the state struggles. There's no one to pick them up.
Well, I mean, I hate to be the fifth person at the table here that we all agree, because that rarely happens. But I agree with what everybody said. I'm anxious to hear some more details about this program, but he has put his name on it. And I think the days of inaction are over. He said that. The eyes of Missouri are on St. Louis to improve itself, and the state governor is willing to help. We should be grateful that our leadership is willing to devote resources and time and pay attention to what's going on. I mean, we represent 25% of the state's economy. We need to be more vibrant. We need to create the jobs. We need to prevent the crime. And what Jeff pointed out, our numbers in the city are down. I believe in 1980 we had over 2,000 police officers. Today we have just over 1,000. There's 150 openings to be a police officer in the city of St. Louis. Many issues need to be addressed. There's no magic answer here, but he's willing to devote his time and energy in helping fix the problem. And I'm grateful he's giving us that
Scott
attention.
Jighouse, when you elected a governor from Jefferson County, known as a stronghold of labor, you knew Jay Nixon really cared about those working people. Whatever you think of him, his style, he cared about members of labor unions, Jeff County type people. When you elect a governor from the inner city, you expect him to care about the inner city
Sure.
and do something. And I also think, do you think the legislature, though, will appropriate extra resources? Because honestly, you talk about economic development, if you could fight back the crime, that would help the entire state.
Well, in economic development, we look at it all the time and say, okay, we need more business, we need more jobs, but we also need people coming to our state. We need people, we need tourism, we need conferences, we need a safe city in the city of St. Louis. I think that the legislature is going to have to look pretty heavily at investing in the city's safety, and I think the governor's taking the first step to lead that charge.
We don't like to admit it outstate, but frankly, there is no free state aid in even West Butler County without a vibrant St. Louis economy. St. Louis pays the freight for this state on many fronts. I mean, I think when you have people come in to want to relocate a business in St. Louis and they open up their mobile app or Twitter and they see another 6 people shot over a weekend, that's not good. There's no way to probably overcome that at times. I mean, this seems like the right thing. What would be the next step, though? What do you do to add to this plan?
Well, I mean, I think one is clarifying what the plan is, how from our point of view, how the Highway Patrol will be used. I mean, I agree that crime, I mean, nobody says that, oh, crime's not a problem. Crime is good. I mean, crime is not good. It's bad in all cases.
It's acutely bad in the city of St. Louis right now. I mean, there's a level of crime you're going to have in every free society. This is out of control.
Yes, but I would say that there are a lot of things that are out of control in St. Louis. I mean, our history of institutionalized racism and how, I think we need to take a step back and look at how we are fighting crime, because it's a systemic, there are lots of pieces to it. So one of the things is, poverty, which is, I mean, needs to be addressed, access to health care.
And the optics were not good with having to cut people's wages while making this announcement. I think reasonable people could argue both sides of all these issues. I mean, they're complex for a reason, but the optics were not good, and I thought the folks that have been protesting for a higher minimum wage had an opportunity and took advantage of it.
I agree. I mean, it is a complex problem. So, it's multifaceted, but I think that we have to be careful and look at how we're doing our policing and knowing that St. Louis has, let's be real, it has a race problem. It's had a race problem for, we'd say compromising since 1820. I mean, it's been, race has been an issue in this state for a long time. So I think that however we fight crime in the long term about economic development, it's how do we grow and how do we innovate? And if we keep doing the same thing and we keep using the same tactics, is that going to work?
Jeff, how big a role, every street in the city. You're actually dealing with these situations. What can you do? What could the state do to actually help solve the problem more than just what the governor put out?
Yeah, well, the bigger thing the governor did this past week, more than just sending a small contingent of troopers to the city, is he signed the zoo bill, which in that bill it also raises the city's tax authority by a penny, sales tax authority. So that's the basis for this sales tax proposition in November, which we hope that the mayor comes to her senses and decides to make a commitment to spend that money on police raises. We have a crime problem in St. Louis. We also have a policing problem, and that is that we're grossly understaffed, and all we can do is barely cover the calls for service. We can't do anything proactive. We don't have the luxury of doing community policing when every cop out there is going from call to call to call and is so overworked and is forced into overtime. We need some help financially, and we're hoping that that's coming.
You brought up an interesting point. Do you think Republicans now look at enabling taxes as permissible to do and something the party would support?
I think that taxes are for government services. I think policing is a basic function, basic government service. I think, we would look at probably St. Louis City and say that they've taxed themselves on things that probably aren't necessary government services, and we would say that they may need to prioritize. But, I don't know that Republicans are going to collectively come out and clamor for raised taxes in St. Louis, but I think that policing is definitely something that should probably warrant some consideration.
Talk about something Republicans do clamor for. The special session dealing with abortion. The governor's adjusted his call. It's went on an interesting amount of time. It's been interesting to watch the politics behind the elongation of this special session. Where does it stand now?
Well, we're waiting for the Senate, I believe, to convene. $73,000 later, I think, is the tab so far for just this abortion-related special session. So one has to ask, how is the governor stewarding our money when there are lots of other things that we could be spending that $73,000 on, not counting the other $60-some-odd thousand for the previous special session. So that is happening. As we see it, the Supreme Court ruled that access to abortion is a right. Missouri is only one of 7 states in the country that has 1 clinic, and the Supreme Court also ruled that medically unnecessary laws are illegal.
Is there any law they could craft coming out of the special session that you believe would withstand federal court scrutiny?
Of everything I've seen, nothing so far.
Jeff Royda, you've been in a special session, you served in the legislature. The cost of the legislature is always mentioned when you don't support what they're doing. It's an interesting thing when you do support it. Well, it's a necessary function, right?
When everybody's taking a check in the meantime.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you that I'm pro-life, Scott, and I think abortion's a legitimate issue for the legislature to take up. Where I think the governor's made a mistake is confining himself to a single issue in these special sessions. We've got some big issues in Missouri, not just abortion. Crime is a big issue. They could have taken that on in this special session among some other very important issues. So I think it's a tactical error for the governor to limit himself.
Representative Blocker, there is a time the state constitution is set up for all the citizens to elect representatives and senators and meet in Jeff City. It's actually 5 months long. It's called the legislative session.
It is, and
right. You can take up any issue you want, right?
Well, I'm confronted with that when we do these special sessions because we're supposed to be a citizen legislature where we have jobs outside of the legislative body. I have my own law firm. I'm working, and for me to take a day off is a vacation time for me to then head down to the state to be in special session. I'm very attentive to the fact that we do need to protect the right to life and that we do need to maybe address some issues, but I'm also respectful for the fact that we have that January through May period to address those issues. Yeah. And in the House, as far as I'm aware, everything we've had this special session on, we've already voted on in the House. So I voted on the right to life bill already. I'd like to see some action, sometimes maybe on the other side, but I'm here to defend life and I'm happy to go down there, but I'm also attentive that things should be done January through May.
So it's interesting. So anytime the Republicans can pass any gun bill, any abortion bill, and throughout our state's history, there's been economic development special sessions. Unless they can find a new gun bill, is there another thing you think could pass in a special session?
Oh, goodness. Not anything off the top of my head. I think that the legislature's tired. I think that they're opposed to being called back, especially the state Senate. I think they're pretty opposed to being called back.
If there's an economic development project that's legitimate,
if there's a big project,
without
a doubt. If there's a big project and it's a timely issue and it's something that has to be dealt with before next January, I think that certainly warrants a call, and that would fit the whole focus or purpose of a special session.
While I'm talking to you, let's talk about this U.S. Senate race. Paul Curtman looks like he's running. Congresswoman Hartzler's made some pretty tough indications. Do you believe Josh Hawley's running? Is this an act? Is it what's going on there?
You know, it's everything is rumors and speculation. It changes every 24 hours and sometimes faster. I've heard that General Hawley is maybe not interested in running. The rumor is that he may be more interested in a federal bench position somewhere down the road. You hear lots of names, lots of speculation. I know that there are a lot of people making phone calls. Congressman Blaine Luetkemeyer, Mike Kehoe, Senator Mike Kehoe.
Representative Eric Schmidt is in
Eric
Washington
Schmidt,
right now.
my former state senator, and another St. Louis, and Marcia Hafner has thrown her name out there. I don't know if she has, but her name has been floated around. So we have some very competent and qualified local talent as well.
If you're Claire McCaskill, which one do you not want to see?
Good question. Probably Hawley, it sounds like, if he does decide to run.
He can raise money, and a lot of his supports come from outside Missouri anyway, so there may be the federal. He's very familiar with the dark money portion that is now part of our politics. He would seem like a very formidable candidate. Attorney generals are popular. Jeff Ruda, you know Eric Schmidt. Eric Schmidt has a geographic advantage over a lot of other Republicans. I mean, he has a high name ID in St. Louis. He's been a successful fundraiser. Interesting time. I think to me, if you talking about a Hawley Schmidt primary, I don't know if that happens, but if Hawley doesn't run, Eric Schmidt makes a lot of sense, doesn't he?
Yeah, when you asked Daniela that question, the first thing that leapt into my mind was Eric Schmidt. If I'm Claire, I don't want Eric in that race. I think he has more appeal to swing voters in the general election than most of the other Republicans mentioned. He certainly has the ability to fundraise, and he's a smart guy and a hard worker.
Claire McCaskill's a good politician, though, right?
She is an awful good politician.
Interesting. With a minute left, who won the week?
Claire McCaskill. You set me up perfectly. I think breaking fundraising records and having Ann retreat from the Senate race, having a sort of a second-tier candidate like Paul Kurtman, who I like and I think is formidable, but he's a state rep that most people in Missouri haven't heard of, and he's the only announced candidate.
Who won the week?
Bruce Franks for his succinct one-word answer
Didn't mince
response
words.
to. Nope, he didn't miss words.
Very
Only used one.
conservative in his use of words. Who won the week?
I think the last 2 months, Representative Rob Vescovo, running for floor leader in the Missouri House, he's put about 11,000 miles on his car in the last 2 months, just going out and talking to caucus
With all
members.
these leadership candidates, does it think they'll understand the need for more highway money for road spending?
You know, I don't know that that's an issue that he's talking to folks about.
Who won the week?
I would say our Secretary of State, Jay Ashcroft. We just had the voter ID law go into place. The most recent election in the 28th Ward went off without a hitch. He's exhaustively traveled the state to educate the voters on the new voter ID law, and I think he's putting a plan in play to have a next smooth election.
And it was on This Week at Missouri Politics. What are you going to do?
Ironically.
I've got two people. One, I'd say the governor won. I think whatever happens, that's a leadership move he took by diving in, and he's the governor. The biggest name will get the credit or the blame. And Carl Vogel, former senator, they signed the legislation this week to bring the prison into an economic development opportunity for the city. I think that's a lot of his work, and he deserves credit. We'll see you next week on This Week in Missouri Politics. This Week in Missouri Politics, brought to you by Spire and Sterling Bank.